I paid $5,000 for my brother's party, and as a thank you, he humiliated me by throwing wine on the dress my late friend gave me. The doorbell rang at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, which should have been my first warning. I was in my pajamas halfway through a documentary about ocean conservation, a glass of wine on the coffee table beside me. My house was exactly how I liked it at that hour. Peaceful and dim, just me and my thoughts and the soft glow of the television. The doorbell shattered that peace like a rock through glass. My parents stood on my porch looking smaller than I remembered. My father's shoulders hunched in a way I'd never seen before. My mother clutching a suitcase with white knuckles that stood out even in the porch light. Behind them, my younger brother leaned against their car with his phone out, not bothering to help with the bags piled near the trunk. He didn't even look up when I opened the door. "We need to talk," my father said, and something in his voice, something broken and desperate, made me step aside and let them in without asking questions. They'd been evicted, 3 months behind on rent, and the landlord had finally followed through on his threats. My mother cried as she explained it, the words tumbling out between sobs about unexpected expenses and my father's reduced hours at the warehouse, and how they never meant for it to get this bad, how it all just snowballed so quickly, how they'd thought they could catch up, but then the car needed repairs, and there were medical bills, and suddenly they were standing on my doorstep with everything they owned packed in their car. My brother said nothing during this entire explanation. He just dropped onto my couch, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy, and continued scrolling through his phone like this was all a minor inconvenience, like his parents weren't falling apart 10 feet away from him. I watched him double-tap something on his screen, probably liking a friend's photo, completely disconnected from the crisis happening around him. "Where have you been staying?" I asked, looking at the three of them, trying to process this sudden invasion of my space. "The car for the past 2 nights," my father admitted, his voice thick with shame that I'd never heard from him before. He'd always been so proud, so strong, and seeing him like this made something in my chest tighten. "We've been parking at rest stops, trying to figure out what to do, trying to decide who to ask for help. I'm a sales manager at a mid-sized tech company, 30 years old, with a decent salary that took me years of hard work to achieve. I bought this house 2 years ago after saving for a down payment since I was 23, living in a cramped studio apartment and eating ramen more nights than I care to remember. It's a modest 3-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy. But it's mine. Every piece of furniture chosen carefully after hours of research. Every wall color deliberated over until I found the exact shade that made me feel calm. Every inch of space organized exactly the way I want it. My sanctuary. My carefully constructed refuge from the chaos of the world. And now I was looking at 3 people with nowhere else to go, and they were my family. So what was I supposed to say? That they couldn't stay? That they should find a shelter or sleep in their car for another night? I could see my mother's hands shaking, could see the exhaustion in my father's eyes, could see my brother's complete lack of concern, and I felt the weight of their desperation pressing against my chest like a physical force. "Just for a few weeks," my mother promised, reaching for my hand with those trembling fingers. Her grip was desperate, almost painful. "Just until we get back on our feet. Your father's looking for a second job, and I'm applying everywhere I can. We just need a little time to save up for a deposit somewhere else. We won't be any trouble, I promise." My brother finally looked up from his phone, and I saw something flash across his face that I couldn't quite identify. Not gratitude, not shame, something else entirely. Something that made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain. "I just graduated," he announced. As if this explained everything. "I need time to find something that matches my qualifications. I'm not working some minimum wage job after getting a degree. That would be a waste of my education and my potential." He was 27. His degree was 4 years old, earned in business management from a state university, and from what I'd heard through family gossip over holiday dinners and occasional phone calls, he'd been living with my parents ever since graduation, contributing nothing while he waited for the perfect opportunity that never seemed to materialize. But I didn't say that. Instead, I said yes, because that's what you do for family, right? You help them when they're down. You open your home and your wallet, and you trust that they'll respect your generosity and work to improve their situation and eventually move on to rebuild their lives elsewhere. That was 6 months ago. The biggest mistake I ever made. The first month wasn't terrible, which gave me false hope that this arrangement might actually work. They were quiet, grateful, careful not to impose too much on my space or my routine. My mother cooked dinners that filled the house with familiar smells from my childhood, lasagna and pot roast and her famous chicken soup. My father helped with yard work on weekends, mowing the lawn and trimming the hedges and fixing that loose board on the back deck that I'd been meaning to deal with for months. My brother stayed in the guest room playing video games, occasionally mentioning some job application he'd submitted, always with a long explanation about why this particular position was perfect for someone with his skills and education. I paid the mortgage and the utilities and the groceries, but I told myself it was temporary. A few months, maybe less if they really worked at it. They'd bounce back. Things would return to normal. My house would be mine again, and we'd all look back on this as a difficult time that brought us closer together as a family. Month 2, the cracks started showing in ways I tried to ignore at first. My mother stopped cooking completely. Too tired, she said constantly, rubbing her temples like she had a perpetual headache that never quite went away. Too stressed from all the job applications she claimed to be submitting, though I never saw her actually working on any. Could I maybe pick up some takeout on my way home from work? Just this once, just tonight. She was too exhausted to even think about standing in front of the stove. That request happened 3 times the first week, 5 times the second week. By the third week, it was every single day without exception. I'd come home after a 10-hour shift to find my mother on the couch watching television, and she'd look up with this expectant expression that made my stomach knot with resentment I tried to suppress. I started keeping receipts from all the takeout purchases, watching the numbers climb higher each week. $40 here, $60 there, sometimes $80 if everyone wanted something different. Within a month, I'd spent over $800 on takeout alone, money that used to go into my savings account or toward home improvements I'd been planning. My father's help with the yard work gradually transformed into suggestions about things I should fix or change or upgrade. The kitchen faucet was old, I should really replace it. The living room furniture was dated. Maybe I should consider something more modern. The paint in the hallway was chipping. Why hadn't I dealt with that? Each observation felt like a criticism, like he was cataloging all the ways my house didn't measure up to some standard I'd never agreed to meet. My brother started eating the lunches I packed for work, carefully prepared the night before with ingredients I'd specifically bought for myself, and stored in labeled containers in the refrigerator, with my name written on masking tape. I'd open the fridge at 6 in the morning, already running late, ready to grab my food and head out the door for my 40-minute commute, and find empty containers stacked carelessly in the sink with dried food stuck to the sides. When I complained, exhausted and frustrated and already stressed about my day, he'd shrug without even looking up from his phone. Just buy more, he'd say with this casual dismissal that made my blood pressure spike and my hands clench into fists. It's not that expensive. You have a job. What's the big deal? Like my job existed solely to provide for him. Like my money wasn't real money I'd worked hard to earn. Like making lunch for myself was some kind of luxury I should be willing to sacrifice for his convenience. He never offered to replace the food he'd eaten, never apologized, never even acknowledged that taking someone else's prepared meals might be inconsiderate. By month 3, I was working Saturdays regularly to cover the increased expenses that were eating through my carefully maintained budget like termites through wood. My house felt smaller every day, crowded with their belongings that had somehow spread from the guest room into every corner of my space. Their clothes draped over my furniture, their dishes piled in my sink, their noise filling the silence I'd once treasured. I'd come home exhausted after a 12-hour shift to find my brother hosting friends in my living room. My beer in their hands, my snacks gone, my furniture stained with God knows what, and everyone acting like I was the intruder in my own home. Some people are just born to work and serve others, my brother announced one Saturday evening as I walked through the door with grocery bags cutting into my hands. I'd spent $300 at the store, money I'd earned during an 8-hour shift that started at 6 in the morning. His friends laughed at this observation. These people I'd never met who were drinking beer I'd paid for while sitting on furniture I'd saved for. My parents said nothing. My mother just sighed like I was being dramatic by looking upset, like my exhaustion was somehow an imposition on everyone else. I should mention that my brother had started telling people a different story about our living situation, a story I didn't discover until it was already widely circulated among his social circle and beyond. A colleague from work, a woman named Patricia from the accounting department who lived 3 streets over in my neighborhood, stopped by unexpectedly one Thursday afternoon to drop off some files I'd accidentally left at the office during a rushed lunch break. I was still at work during what turned into an 14-hour day, but my brother was home as always. And when I finally arrived home after 9 that evening, completely exhausted, I found his car in the driveway alongside 2 others I didn't recognize. I could hear voices and laughter coming from my garage, which my brother had apparently decided to convert into a hangout space without asking permission. When I walked around the side of the house to investigate, I caught the tail end of a conversation that made my blood run cold. According to him, this was his house. He'd bought it with money from an inheritance. He'd been paying the mortgage for years. He'd worked hard to achieve this level of success. I was the struggling younger sister who'd fallen on hard times, lost my job, couldn't make ends meet. He'd graciously agreed to let me live here as a tenant, basically a charity case he was kind enough to support out of familial obligation. His friends nodded sympathetically, glancing at me with pity when I appeared in the doorway with confusion written all over my face. When I confronted him later that evening, pulling him aside in the kitchen while my parents watched television in the other room, completely oblivious or perhaps deliberately ignorant, he just smiled. That same smile I'd seen on his face when he looked up from his phone that first night, the smile that never quite reached his eyes. "You're hearing things," he said calmly, opening my refrigerator like he owned it, and pouring himself a glass of orange juice from the pitcher I'd bought that morning, along with $40 worth of groceries he'd helped himself to throughout the day. Why would I say that? You're being paranoid. Honestly, I'm worried about you. Maybe you're stressed from working too much. Maybe you need to take some time off, get some rest, clear your head. His gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, like he'd been rehearsing these lines. He even managed to look concerned, his forehead wrinkling in fake worry. But his eyes held something calculated, something cold and deliberate, something that made my stomach turn and my hands shake with suppressed anger. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was building a narrative brick by brick, constructing a version of reality where he was the hero and I was the burden. And he was spreading that story to anyone who would listen with the dedication of someone running a campaign. "I know what I heard," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Patricia told me what you said to your friends, about how this is your house, about how I'm living here as your tenant." "Patricia," he repeated, shaking his head sadly. "She must have misunderstood. You know how people hear what they want to hear. I was probably talking about how I'm helping you out, how I'm here to support you during a difficult time. She must have gotten confused." His tone was so reasonable, so patient, like he was explaining something simple to someone slow to understand. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning when I was trying to enjoy my one full day off in 2 weeks, my brother made an announcement over breakfast that he'd cooked for himself using ingredients I'd bought. He declared with absolute confidence, that his 28th birthday coming up in a month deserved a proper celebration. Not just cake and dinner at home like a normal adult might have, but a big party at a rented venue. The kind of elaborate event that typically costs thousands of dollars and requires months of planning. He'd already picked out the place, he continued, showing me photos on his phone of a fancy event space downtown with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. He'd already made preliminary plans, contacted the venue, discussed menu options with the catering company. He'd already invited 50 people through some event app, showing me the growing list of confirmed attendees that included his friend group, distant cousins I hadn't seen in years, former classmates, and people I'd never even heard of. He just needed help with the funding, he said with that same expectant smile. Just a small contribution from the family to make it all happen. After all, you only turned 28 once. "We can't afford it," my mother said, looking directly at me with this expectant expression I'd come to dread. "But maybe you could help? It's his birthday. Family helps family. And you've been working all those extra hours, so I know you have some money saved up. It would mean so much to him." I said no, firmly, clearly, without room for negotiation or guilt trips or emotional manipulation. I was already drowning in expenses, already working overtime every Saturday just to keep everyone fed and housed and comfortable. My savings account had been depleted by $3,000 since they'd moved in. My credit card balance was creeping upward. I wasn't paying for some elaborate party on top of everything else. The answer was no. My brother's smile disappeared instantly, replaced by something dark and threatening that transformed his whole face. "If you don't help with this," he said quietly, leaning across the kitchen table so his face was close to mine, "I'm going to tell everyone the truth about how you've been treating us. How you charge your own parents exorbitant rent that they can barely afford. How you exploit us, making us pay for every piece of food we eat while living in luxury yourself. How you're the worst kind of family member, greedy and selfish and completely without compassion." "That's not true," I said, hearing my voice shake despite my attempt to stay calm. "I don't charge you anything. I pay for everything. You know that's not true. But that's not what I'll tell them," he replied, his voice soft and controlled and absolutely certain. "And who do you think they'll believe? The struggling son who's trying to take care of his elderly parents? working hard to find the right job and doing his best under difficult circumstances? Or the bitter sister who everyone will say was always jealous of me, always resentful, always looking for ways to make herself feel superior? My mother started crying on cue, like this was a performance she'd practiced. "Please," she begged, reaching for my hand across the table. "Don't let him ruin his own birthday. Don't make the whole family hate you. Don't destroy our relationships over something so small. Just this once, help us. We're family. Family is supposed to support each other." I felt the walls closing in, felt the air getting thinner, felt the weight of their expectations crushing down on my shoulders. The threat hung in the air like poison gas, invisible but deadly. My extended family, my cousins and aunts and uncles who I saw at every holiday dinner and summer barbecue and family reunion, who I'd grown up with and shared memories with and cared about. If my brother spread his version of events, if my parents backed him up with their tears and their stories, my reputation would be destroyed. I'd become the villain in a story I hadn't written, the cruel daughter who turned her back on her family in their time of need. So I paid $3,000 for the venue, $3,000. A fancy event space downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and crystal chandeliers. Another $1,000 for catering, elaborate dishes with names I couldn't pronounce, $500 for a professional DJ with lights and sound equipment, another $500 for a photographer who would capture every moment, $200 for decorations that matched some color scheme my brother had picked out. I paid it all, and watched my savings account shrink to almost nothing, and felt something inside me shrinking too. Some sense of self-worth or dignity or basic human respect that was being carved away piece by piece. "See?" my brother said when I handed him the final check, when the total reached $5,200 for a birthday party for a 28-year-old man who'd never worked a day in his adult life. He smiled, that same cold, calculated smile. "You're finally being useful for something, finally serving your purpose in this family." The party was on a Saturday 3 weeks later. I worked the morning shift at the office because we had a major client presentation that couldn't be rescheduled, handling details and answering questions and solving problems while my family prepared for a celebration I'd financed entirely. I came home at 2 in the afternoon, showered quickly, changed into a dress I'd bought specifically for this event because I'd wanted to look nice, wanted to feel like I belonged at this party even though every dollar spent reminded me of my own diminishing bank account. I drove to the venue that I'd paid for in full, parked in a lot that charged $20, which seemed like a cruel joke, walked into a space that had been transformed exactly according to my brother's specifications. The decorations were elegant and expensive, thousands of dollars worth of flowers and fabric and custom signage with his name emblazoned across banners hanging from the ceiling. A DJ was setting up professional equipment in the corner. More equipment than seemed necessary for 50 people, but apparently essential according to my brother's vision. The catering staff arranged elaborate dishes on pristine white tablecloths, food that looked like art, food that cost more per plate than I usually spent on groceries for a week. Every detail represented hours of my work, hundreds of dollars I'd earned through long shifts and missed weekends, and sacrificed personal time. I'd stayed late at the office 17 times in the past month to cover the cost of this party. I'd skipped buying new work clothes I desperately needed. I'd canceled my gym membership and stopped going out with friends and eaten plain pasta for dinner 4 nights a week to save money. All so my brother could have his perfect party. He stood near the entrance in an expensive suit I'd never seen before, probably purchased with money my parents had somehow scraped together, greeting guests with the confident air of someone who'd paid for all of this himself. I watched him pose for photos in front of the decorative backdrop that had cost $600, watched him laugh with friends about how much planning had gone into this event, watched him accept compliments about the venue and the food and the atmosphere. Not once did he mention my name. Not once did he acknowledge that anyone else had contributed to making this celebration possible. When I approached to say happy birthday, hoping for at least some acknowledgement of what I'd done, his face changed instantly. The warm smile he'd been giving everyone else vanished completely, replaced by something cold and dismissive that felt like a physical slap. He glanced at his friends standing nearby, then leaned close to me and whispered harshly, his breath hot against my ear, "Try to stay out of the way. Maybe find a corner somewhere in the back. This is my night, not yours. I don't need you embarrassing me in front of my friends." His friends looked at me with barely concealed contempt, their expressions matching the pity I'd seen from people before. They believed his story completely. They thought I was the pathetic sister who'd failed at life, who lived off his charity, who probably showed up hoping for free food and attention. One of them actually said something to another guest, not quite quiet enough for me not to hear, about how sad it was that my brother felt obligated to invite me, how uncomfortable it must be for him having me here. I sat in the back of the venue, at a table far from the main action, alone, watching people enjoy food I'd bought, entertainment I'd paid for, in a space I'd rented. Watching my brother laugh with his friends, my parents smile and mingle with relatives. Everyone having a wonderful time at an event that had cost me $5,200 and countless hours of extra work. My brother's girlfriend, a woman I'd met exactly once, kept shooting me hostile looks from across the room, clearly having been fed the same story about me being a burden on her generous boyfriend. The cake came out at 9, wheeled in on a decorated cart by 2 catering staff members. Huge and elaborate, 3 tiers covered in intricate frosting designs, topped with sparklers that cast flickering light across the room. Another $200 that I'd paid without being told the price until after it was ordered. The crowd gathered around, singing happy birthday with enthusiasm, phones out to record the moment for social media. My brother beamed at the attention, soaking it in like he'd achieved something remarkable, like this party was evidence of his success and popularity and importance. I stood at the edge of the group, just wanting to be part of this one moment, this one tradition, just wanting to exist in the same space as my family during what was supposed to be a celebration. My mother saw me and turned away deliberately. My father looked uncomfortable but said nothing. And my brother saw me standing there, saw me watching from the periphery, and I watched something cruel and deliberate settle into his expression. He picked up a large piece of the cake, held it in his hand with frosting oozing between his fingers, walked directly toward me while the crowd watched with confused interest, wondering what he was doing, probably expecting some kind of touching family moment. And then, without warning, without hesitation, without a single word of explanation, he smashed the cake directly into my face with enough force to snap my head back slightly. The room erupted. Laughter, everywhere, from everyone, loud and harsh and cruel, echoing off the high ceilings and crystal chandeliers. The cake was thick and heavy, coating my face completely, my hair, my eyes, my mouth. It dripped down my neck and stained the dress I'd worn to try to feel like I belonged here. Frosting filled my nose and I could barely breathe, could barely see through the layers of chocolate and cream. "I don't want clowns at my party," my brother announced loudly, his voice carrying across the whole room with perfect clarity. "Especially failed ones who can't even take care of themselves. This is my celebration and I won't have pathetic people ruining it." More laughter, louder now, people pointing and recording on their phones. I could see the screens glowing in my peripheral vision, knew this moment was being captured and shared and would exist forever on the internet. My parents stood 15 feet away, watching all of this unfold, and they laughed too. They actually laughed. My mother's hand was over her mouth, but her shoulders shook with amusement. My father grinned and shook his head like I was a child who'd done something silly, like this was all in good fun. People started chanting, "Out, out, out!" Like I was some kind of intruder who'd crashed a private event. Someone recorded it on their phone, announcing they were uploading it to social media right now, tagging mutual friends. Another person yelled something about charity cases knowing their place, about people needing to understand when they're not wanted. My brother's girlfriend laughed the loudest, clapping her hands with genuine delight at my humiliation. I stood there, cake covering my face, 50 people laughing at my public humiliation, my own family standing by and doing nothing to defend me, and something inside me that had been bending for 6 months, that had been accepting and tolerating and swallowing my pride and my anger and my resentment, finally snapped completely. I wiped the cake away slowly, methodically, using napkins from a nearby table. The room gradually quieted as they watched me, probably expecting tears or an angry outburst or some dramatic scene they could laugh about later. Instead, I walked calmly to where the DJ had set up his equipment, my movements controlled and deliberate. "Can I borrow this?" I asked, picking up his microphone. He looked confused but nodded, probably thinking I was going to make some kind of grateful speech thanking my brother for including me. I turned to face the room. 50 people, all watching now, curiosity replacing amusement on their faces. My brother's smile faltered slightly, some instinct telling him that something was wrong, that this wasn't going according to his plan. "I just want everyone here to know something important," I said clearly, my voice amplified through the speakers, carrying to every corner of the venue. This entire party was paid for by me. Every single dollar. The venue rental, the food, the DJ, the decorations, the photographer, even the cake that's currently dripping down my face. All of it. $5,200. I paid for every bit of it while working overtime at my job to afford it. The murmurs started immediately. People glancing at each other, at my brother, at me, confusion spreading across faces. My brother opened his mouth to say something, but I continued before he could interrupt. I also pay for the house where my brother and parents have been living rent-free for the past 6 months. I pay the mortgage every month, $1,500. I pay the utilities, about $300 monthly. I pay for all the groceries, roughly $800 a month for 4 people. They contribute nothing, not one single dollar. My brother doesn't work because he's waiting for a job that matches his qualifications. His 4-year-old degree that he's done nothing with. He just graduated, you see, 4 years ago. My brother's face had gone pale, his confident smile completely gone. "You're lying," he said, but his voice cracked on the words, making them sound desperate rather than convincing. "She's making this up. She's upset because I asked her to stay out of the spotlight. Am I?" I handed the microphone back to the DJ with a nod of thanks. Pulled out my phone with hands that had finally stopped shaking. I have the receipts. All of them. Every payment for this party saved in my email. Every utility bill with my name on it. Every grocery receipt from the past 6 months. Bank statements showing exactly where my money has gone. Would anyone like to see them? I'm happy to share. Silence. Complete, uncomfortable, absolute silence. People who'd been laughing 30 seconds ago now looked uncertain, shifting their weight. Not sure where to look. My brother glanced around at his friends, at the guests, at his girlfriend who'd stopped laughing and now looked confused, and found no support anywhere. They were all looking at him now with suspicion, with doubt, with the dawning realization that they'd been lied to and manipulated and used as props in his performance. "You know what?" I said, my voice carrying even without the microphone because everyone was so quiet. "If I'm such a pathetic clown who's unwelcome at this party, who deserves to be humiliated in front of everyone, then you're all unwelcome in my house. All of you. Effective immediately." I pulled out my phone again, dialed a number I'd programmed into my contacts months ago, but never thought I'd actually use. My friend who's a locksmith, who'd offered her services half-jokingly when I'd complained about my family situation over drinks one evening. She told me to call any time if things got bad enough, and I'd laughed and said I'd never need it. But I'd saved her number anyway, just in case. "Hey," I said, loud enough for everyone in the venue to hear clearly. "Remember that offer to change my locks tonight if I ever needed it? I'm taking you up on it right now. How fast can you get to my house?" "I can be there in 2 hours," she said. And I could hear the grin in her voice, could hear the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for me to finally stand up for myself. "I'll bring everything I need. This is going to be fun. Perfect. I'll meet you there. Thanks." I hung up, looked at my brother, at my parents who'd finally stopped laughing and now looked panicked, at all the people who'd been so entertained by my humiliation just minutes ago. "You have until tomorrow at noon to get your belongings out of my house. I'll have everything boxed and ready on the porch. After that, I'm donating whatever's left to charity." The party descended into complete chaos as I walked toward the exit. My brother screaming that I couldn't do this, that it was illegal, that he had rights as a tenant. My mother crying and calling my name. My father trying to follow me to the parking lot, saying we could talk about this, be reasonable, work something out. People filming everything on their phones, capturing every word. The story already changing in real time as they witnessed the truth. I drove home with cake still in my hair and frosting stained on my dress that would probably never come out, called my friend back to confirm she was on her way, then sat on my porch and waited. My phone blew up with calls and texts. My mother and father and brother all leaving increasingly desperate messages that I ignored one by one. Voicemails piled up, notifications filled my screen, but I just sat there in the quiet evening air and waited for the locksmith to arrive. My house. My sanctuary that had been invaded and exploited and taken for granted. It was about to be mine again. The new locks were installed by 11:30, each one clicking into place with a satisfying sense of finality. 3 exterior doors, all the windows that opened from outside for ventilation, even the garage door mechanism that my brother had been using to come and go at all hours. My friend worked efficiently, asking no questions beyond which locks I wanted changed and what level of security I wanted, just humming along to music from her phone while she replaced each mechanism with professional precision born from years of experience. I watched her work, feeling something like hope building in my chest with each lock that got changed, each barrier that went up between me and the people who'd been exploiting me. She'd brought a whole kit of supplies, different types of locks and keys and hardware, treating this like the serious job it was. "You need anything else?" she asked when she finished packing up her tools. Security cameras? Better outdoor lighting? I know people who can install that stuff. Maybe later, I said. This is good for now. How much do I owe you? She quoted a price that seemed reasonable for emergency weekend service. I paid her in cash from money I'd withdrawn earlier, money I'd been saving for emergencies. This qualified. I thanked her more than was probably necessary, my voice catching slightly with emotion and relief and exhaustion. You're doing the right thing, she said, putting a hand on my shoulder. I don't know the full story, but anyone who shows up needing all their locks changed this urgently is making the right call. Take care of yourself. At midnight exactly, my family arrived. I heard the car pull up, heard the doors slam with more force than necessary, heard them approach the front door with their keys out and voices raised in ongoing argument. I listened from my bedroom window to the sounds of confusion as those keys didn't work, the frustrated jiggling of handles, the moment of realization that I'd actually followed through on my threat. Then the angry pounding started. Fists on my door, the doorbell ringing continuously, voices yelling loud enough to wake the neighbors. "Open up right now!" My brother screamed, his voice raw with rage. "You can't do this! This is illegal! I have tenant rights! I'll call the police! I'll sue you! You can't just lock people out without notice!" "Please call them," I said through the closed door, loud enough to be heard but without opening up. "I'd love to explain to police officers how you've been living here rent-free for 6 months, with no lease, no rental agreement, and no payments of any kind. I consulted a lawyer last week. Guests who don't pay rent and have no formal tenancy agreement can be asked to leave. You're not tenants. You're guests who overstayed their welcome. So yes, please call the police. I'd enjoy describing how you assaulted me with cake at a party I paid for while they explain that you have no legal right to be here. Go ahead. Call them." More pounding. Harder now, the door shaking in its frame. My mother's crying reached a theatrical pitch, the kind of performance she'd perfected over the years to get her way. Wailing about being homeless and having nowhere to go and how could I do this to my own family. My father's voice alternated between demanding and pleading, trying every angle to manipulate me into reconsidering. "This is your mother," she shrieked. "Your own mother who gave birth to you, who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? By throwing me out onto the street like garbage? What kind of daughter are you?" "The kind who's done being taken advantage of," I replied calmly. "The kind who finally learned that family doesn't give you the right to exploit and humiliate someone. You can come back tomorrow at noon to collect your belongings. I'll have everything boxed and ready on the porch. That's all." I opened an upstairs window briefly, just long enough to be heard clearly. "You have my number. Text me when you find a hotel. I'll respond tomorrow with the time you can pick up your things. But you're not coming inside this house again. Ever." My brother tried for another 20 minutes, cycling through threats, insults, and eventually attempts at manipulation. He was sorry, he said. It was just a joke that went too far. Everyone was being too sensitive. Couldn't we talk about this like adults? He'd change, he promised. He'd get a job immediately. He'd start contributing. Just give him another chance. I closed the window and turned off the lights, letting the darkness and silence be my only response. Eventually, I heard my mother suggest finding a hotel, heard their footsteps retreat, heard the car start and drive away. The sound of that engine fading into the distance was the sweetest thing I'd heard in 6 months. I walked through my house, room by room, turning on every light. The silence was incredible. Pure, absolute, untouched by anyone's demands or complaints or expectations. Nobody asking me for money or food or favors. Nobody making messes I'd have to clean. Nobody treating my sanctuary like their personal hotel where I was the maid and the bank and the punching bag all rolled into one. I slept better that night than I had in 6 months, waking up at 8 feeling more rested than I remembered being in ages. The next morning, I boxed their belongings with careful precision. I wasn't trying to be cruel or destructive. I just wanted them gone. Everything organized by person, nothing damaged or thrown carelessly into boxes. Their clothes folded, their personal items wrapped carefully, their toiletries separated into bags so nothing would leak or break. I was done with them, but I wasn't going to give them ammunition to claim I'd destroyed their property. They arrived at noon with a rental truck and 2 of my uncles, probably expecting backup would change my mind or intimidate me into backing down. My uncles looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and my parents like they weren't sure what story they'd been told versus what was actually happening. They'd probably heard some version where I was the unreasonable one, where this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved with family mediation. "Everything's on the porch," I said from my doorway, not stepping outside. "Take it and go." My mother tried one more performance. You're really going to throw your own family out on the street? After everything we've done for you? After all the years we supported you and raised you and loved you? This is how you repay us? With cruelty and hatred? Everything you've done for me? The laugh that came out was harsh, months of resentment finally finding voice. You've lived in my house for 6 months without paying a single dollar in rent. I've fed you, housed you, kept a roof over your heads while working overtime to afford it. And what did I get in return? Lies about me spread to anyone who would listen. Exploitation of my money and my generosity. Public humiliation at a party I paid for entirely. So yes, I'm really going to do this. Consider us even for those years you supported me as a child, when that was your job as parents. My brother started to say something, but one of my uncles put a hand on his shoulder, surprisingly firm. Let's just load the truck, my uncle said quietly, his tone carrying a warning. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes that might have been apology or understanding or respect. We'll get out of your way. They loaded everything in 40 minutes of tense silence. My parents kept trying to make eye contact with me, kept opening their mouths to say something, but I stayed on my porch with my arms crossed and my expression neutral, giving them nothing. When the truck was finally full, they stood there in a small defeated cluster, maybe waiting for me to crack, to invite them back in, to forgive everything and pretend it never happened. I went inside and locked the door without saying goodbye. A month passed. 31 days of gradually reclaiming my life, my space, my peace of mind in ways both large and small. I returned to my normal work schedule. No more mandatory overtime just to cover basic expenses. If I worked late now, it was because I wanted to, because there was a project I cared about or extra money I wanted for something specific, not because I was desperately trying to stay financially afloat while supporting 3 adults who contributed nothing. I came home every evening to a clean house that stayed clean because I was the only one living in it. No dirty dishes appearing in the sink throughout the day. No trash overflowing because someone was too lazy to take it out. No mysterious stains on my furniture or crumbs ground into my carpet. The silence when I walked through my door was magnificent, broken only by sounds I chose, music I selected, television shows I actually wanted to watch. I cooked meals that nobody else ate, following recipes I'd been wanting to try for months but hadn't because my family always complained if dinner wasn't something familiar and simple. I made elaborate pastas and tried new spice combinations and didn't have to hear anyone criticize my cooking or demand something different. I watched whatever I wanted on television without negotiating or compromising or giving up the remote. I went to bed when I felt like it without worrying about noise from the living room or my brother's friends showing up at midnight or my father's alarm going off at 5 in the morning for his warehouse job. I paid my bills comfortably again, watched my bank account slowly recover, started rebuilding my savings that had been depleted to nothing. I bought new furniture to replace the pieces my brother's friends had ruined, chose colors and styles I actually liked instead of just accepting whatever was cheapest. I repainted my living room in a shade of blue I'd been considering for months. I bought plants and arranged them on my windowsills. I made my house feel like mine again. My cousin called 3 weeks after I'd changed the locks. I heard what happened, she said carefully, her tone neutral. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I said, and realized it was true. Better than fine, actually. Better than I've been in months. Your parents are living in a single rented room across town, she continued, clearly having been designated as the family messenger. Small place, 1 room with a kitchenette and a bathroom they all share. Your dad got a job as a night security guard at an office building. Your mom's cleaning houses during the day. And your brother finally got a job at a retail store, stocking shelves and working a register, making minimum wage. Good for them, I said, and meant it genuinely. They were working, actually contributing to their own survival instead of draining mine, learning what it meant to struggle, to budget, to make difficult choices about spending. Sounds like they're figuring things out. They're struggling, my cousin said, her voice carrying a note of judgment. It's really tight financially. They're sharing 1 small room with barely any furniture. They're eating cheap food, rice and beans most nights. They're barely making rent each month with no money left over for anything else. It's hard for them. That is unfortunate, I replied, keeping my voice even. And it was unfortunate. I didn't want them to suffer needlessly. But I also didn't want to rescue people who'd treated me like garbage the moment I'd given them everything they needed. But they're adults. They'll figure it out. People adapt. My cousin sighed, clearly hoping I'd show more sympathy or guilt. I just thought you should know what's happening with them. In case you wanted to reach out, in case you wanted to help. Thanks for telling me, I said. But no, I don't want to reach out, and I definitely don't want to help. They made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. Messages started appearing in my Instagram inbox a few days later. Notifications from people I barely knew, people who'd been at the party. 3 separate messages, all variations of the same theme, all carrying the same tone of embarrassed apology. The first one, "Hey, I was at your brother's party. I'm really sorry for laughing at what happened. I had no idea you'd paid for everything. Your brother told us all this story about how you were living off him, and we believed him. I feel terrible about it now. That video circulated around our friend group, and now everyone knows the truth. We all feel like idiots for believing his lies." The second, "I don't know if you remember me from the party, but I was there when your brother did that. I laughed along with everyone else, and I'm really ashamed of that now." Someone posted the whole thing on social media, and people have been sharing it with context about what really happened. Your brother's being roasted in the comments. Anyway, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. The third, "Just wanted to say I'm sorry for participating in what happened at that party. I realize now that we were all manipulated into being part of something really cruel. Your brother has been telling people his version for months, and we all believed him because why would we question it? But after seeing what happened and learning the truth, I understand we were completely wrong. I hope you're doing okay." I read the messages but didn't respond initially. What was there to say? They'd participated in my humiliation based on lies, sure, but they'd still laughed. They'd still recorded it. They'd still made me feel small and worthless in that moment. Their apologies were nice, I guess. But they didn't erase the memory of being publicly degraded while dozens of people found it entertaining. But then I read them again and realized something. They'd been manipulated too. My brother had spent months constructing a narrative, spreading lies, building a version of reality where he was the generous provider and I was the failure. They'd believed someone they considered a friend, and when they learned the truth, they'd felt guilty enough to reach out and apologize. I responded to each message with a simple, "Thank you for apologizing. I appreciate it. Nothing more, nothing less." I wasn't ready to forgive completely, but I could acknowledge their effort to make amends. My father sent a single text message 4 weeks after I'd changed the locks. "We were wrong. I'm sorry." 7 words. That was it. No explanation, no details, no acknowledgement of specific behavior or promises to change. Just a brief statement that barely scratched the surface of 6 months of exploitation and humiliation. I stared at that message for a long time, sitting on my couch in the house that finally felt peaceful again. Part of me wanted to respond, wanted to engage, wanted to hear more, wanted to believe that he truly understood what they'd done and why it was wrong. Wanted to imagine some kind of reconciliation where we could rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. But a larger part of me remembered watching him laugh as cake dripped down my face at that party. Remembered him standing by silently while my brother spread lies about me for months. Remembered him making suggestions about what I should fix in my house while contributing nothing. Remembered 6 months of taking advantage of my generosity without a single word of genuine thanks or respect or basic human decency. I blocked the number without responding. My mother tried calling twice over the next week. Both times I let it go to voicemail, and both times I deleted the messages without listening. I didn't need to hear whatever manipulation or guilt trip or plea for forgiveness she'd prepared. I'd heard enough from her over the years to know exactly what those messages would say. My brother sent a string of texts that ranged from angry to manipulative to almost apologetic, a progression that would have been interesting if it hadn't been so predictable. The angry ones blamed me for everything, called me selfish and cruel and vindictive. The manipulative ones tried to make me feel guilty for abandoning my family. The apologetic ones claimed he'd learned his lesson and wanted another chance. I blocked him too, after the 5th message. I'd given him 6 months of chances. 6 months of excuses and second chances and benefit of the doubt. He'd used every single one to make my life worse. The thing about boundaries is that they only work if you enforce them consistently. I'd spent 6 months letting my family cross every line I'd tried to draw, letting them take and take and take because I felt obligated to help, because they were family, because saying no felt cruel. But saying yes had been crueler. To myself, to my mental health, to my financial stability, to my sense of self-worth and basic human dignity. I'd lit myself on fire to keep them warm, and all they'd done was complain that the flames weren't bright enough, that I wasn't burning fast enough, that I should be grateful for the opportunity to sacrifice myself for their comfort. Now I live in my house the way I always should have lived in it. I wake up when I want without anyone making noise in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. I eat the food I buy for myself without coming home to empty containers. I work my regular hours without overtime unless I choose to take it for something I actually want. I pay my bills on time and still have money left over for things I enjoy. Little luxuries I'd forgotten about during those months of supporting 3 additional adults. My living room looks exactly the way I want it to look, decorated with things I chose for myself. My kitchen stays clean because I'm the only one using it. My guest room is actually for guests now, not permanent residents who contribute nothing and complain about everything. I bought new furniture to replace the pieces my brother's friends had ruined with their spills and cigarette burns. I repainted the walls in colors I'd been planning before my family moved in and derailed all my plans. I hung pictures I liked, arranged books on shelves the way I preferred, bought kitchen equipment I'd been wanting for years. Sometimes I think about that night at the party, about the cake in my face and the laughter echoing off the walls, and the way my own parents stood by and let it happen without saying a word in my defense. I think about how close I came to just accepting it, to cleaning myself up and going home and continuing to be their doormat because challenging them felt too hard, too scary, too likely to make me the villain in everyone's eyes. But I also think about walking out of that venue with my head high, about the satisfaction of changing those locks, about the silence in my house that first night after they left, about reclaiming my life from people who'd taken it for granted, who'd assumed I would always be there to exploit because I was family. And family is supposed to help each other no matter what. My cousin called again last week, her 3rd attempt at playing family mediator. "Your parents want to know if you'll consider talking to them," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "They say they've learned their lesson. They want a chance to apologize properly face to face. They miss you." "Maybe someday," I said, watching birds outside my kitchen window while I made coffee in my peaceful house. "But not today, not this month, probably not this year." "What about your brother?" "Never." She paused, and I could hear her disapproval through the silence. "That's pretty harsh, don't you think? He's still your brother. Family is family." "Is it harsh?" I asked, pouring cream into my coffee exactly the way I liked it without someone complaining about how much I used. "He spent 6 months lying about me, actively working to destroy my reputation. He exploited me financially while spreading stories that I was exploiting him. He humiliated me publicly at an event I paid for entirely, smashed cake in my face in front of 50 people, and called me a failed clown. He turned mutual friends against me with deliberate lies. He tried to make me into a villain in a story I didn't write. So no, I don't think never wanting to see him again is harsh. I think it's basic self-preservation. I think it's the minimum requirement for respecting myself." "Fair enough," she said quietly. And I heard something in her voice that might have been understanding. "I'll let them know. The truth is, I don't know if I'll ever reconcile with my parents. Part of me misses them sometimes, misses the relationship we had before all of this happened, before they moved into my house and I learned who they really were when they needed something from someone. I miss the idea of them, the parents I thought I had before reality proved otherwise. But I can't separate that nostalgia from the memory of them laughing at my humiliation. Or the 6 months where they watched my brother treat me like garbage, and not only said nothing, but actively participated in taking advantage of me. I can't forget coming home exhausted after working overtime to pay their bills, and having them complain that I hadn't bought the right brand of coffee. I can't unhear my mother's guilt trips, or my father's passive-aggressive suggestions, or their complete lack of gratitude for everything I did. Maybe someday we'll talk. Maybe someday they'll actually understand what they did and why it was wrong. Maybe someday they'll realize that family obligations don't mean one person gets to be the eternal provider while everyone else takes without giving. Maybe someday I'll be ready to hear them out and consider whether they've genuinely changed. But I'm in no rush. I spent too long prioritizing their needs over mine, sacrificing my comfort and my peace and my financial security for their benefit, while they showed me nothing but disrespect. I'm done with that version of myself. The person who said yes to everything because saying no made me feel guilty. I'm done with being the family member who's expected to give everything and accept nothing in return, except more demands and more expectations, and more ways to fail at meeting their endless needs. My house is mine again, truly mine in a way it hasn't been since that Tuesday night 6 months ago when I opened my door and let them in. My life is mine again, filled with my choices and my priorities and my peace. I'm paying my own bills without resentment, eating my own food without anxiety, sleeping in my own bed without anyone demanding anything from me when I wake up. And that's worth more than any family reconciliation that requires me to go back to being their victim, their wallet, their punching bag. That's worth more than maintaining relationships with people who only valued me for what I could provide. That's worth the guilt trips and the family gossip and the cousins who think I'm being too harsh. So that's where I am now. Living alone in the house I bought with my own money, enjoying the peace I fought for, and maintaining boundaries that actually mean something. My family learned that exploiting someone's generosity has real consequences. My brother learned that lies eventually come out and people eventually see through manipulation. My parents learned that their daughter has limits, that there's a point past which forgiveness becomes impossible. And I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is close the door on people who refuse to respect you, regardless of whether you share DNA with them. The house is quiet in the best possible way. The bills are paid comfortably every single month. My savings account is slowly but steadily recovering. And I'm finally, genuinely, authentically happy with my life for the first time in 6 months. That's enough for me. That's more than enough.